on to Principles and Practice of Procurement. Unit 6, Contract Document and Pricing Arrangement. Section 3, Contract Document. In all our dealings, there are various processes as well as documentations to authenticate our transactions. In this section, we are going to go through some of the documents used in procurement and supply contracts. At the end of this section, you should be able to define contracts and agreements, understand quotations and tender documents, understand key performance indicators. Defining contracts and agreements. A contract is simply an agreement between two or more parties which is intended to be legally binding. The legally binding aspect makes a contract different from a social agreement, such as arranging to borrow a friend's car for a day. In a social agreement, if one of the parties does not carry out his or a part of the deal, he will not be taken to court or by the other enforce the agreement. However, if the agreement is between two commercial enterprises, it is presumed that there is an intention to enter into a legal relations, that is, to use the law to enforce the agreement if necessary. The law of contract is concerned with four basic questions. 1. Is there a contract in existence? The fundamental requirement is for there to be a clear, mutually understood agreement between the parties in the form of an offer and an acceptance. So at all times, we should make sure there is a contract in existence, an offer has been made, and an acceptance to the offer has also been made. 2. Is the agreement one which the law should recognize and enforce? Some contracts will be wholly or partly invalid or enforced because of some vitiating factors such as mistake or misunderstanding in what a party thought it was agreeing to. So if a vitiating factor exists in a contract, the existence of this factor will cripple or invalidate the contract, either in part or wholly. Vitiating factors will include mistake, misrepresentation, duress, undue influence, or illegality. So if any of these is present in the contract, it can cripple the contract and may render the contract void. The third question to ask is, when do the obligations of the parties come to an end? The most common method of terminating a contract is when both parties have performed their agreed obligations to mutual satisfaction. That is, when the contract has been fulfilled. However, contracts can also be terminated by the failure of one or both parties to meet an essential term of the contract. That's when a party breaches the contract. Then the contract can come to an end. The contract can be terminated. The fourth question to ask here is, what remedies are available for the injured party if the other party fails to meet its contractual obligations? Possible remedies will include the right to terminate all obligations under the contract and monetary compensation for loss. Now that we've established the clear difference between the contract and an agreement, we are now going to go over some documents used in procurement for which acceptance of it will render that both parties have agreed to enter into a contract. The quotations and tender document. We have the request for quotation, invitation to tender, and the key performance indicators. We're going to take them one after the other and explain. So first, we have request for quotation. Request for quotation is a procurement method that is used for small value procurement of readily available off-the-shelf goods, small value construction works, or small value service procurement. This is based on comparing price quotations obtained from several suppliers, usually at least 3, to ensure competitive prices. So a buying organization that meets requirements for as long as the value of the requirement is low. The value of the items are considered low when they meet a certain threshold, and the issue of thresholds are dealt with in the Public Procurement Act 2003 Act 663. So the Public Procurement Act 2003 Act 663 outlines certain thresholds for which we can use request for quotation or request for tender, invitation to tender. So once the value of the requirement falls within that threshold, if the requirement is considered low value, the purchase is a low value purchase, and hence the organization must request quotation from at least 3 suppliers. We can't use request for quotation when we have less than 3 suppliers in our supplying organization. If there are less than 3 suppliers for a particular requirement, then we have to use other methods aside the request for quotation, because at all times, at least a minimum of 3 suppliers must be used and the request for quotation. So the organization here will make an offer to suppliers by issuing this request for quotation document to some selected suppliers that have been pre-qualified by the organization. And in an attempt to accept this offer made by the organizations, the suppliers will respond to this request with their quotation documents. So the buying organization will issue a request for quotation, and in response to the request for quotation, the supplying organization will also give out the quotation documents. And usually, because these items are low value, readily off the shelf items, we only seek to compare prices, price quotations. The second document we have here is the invitation to tender. So just like the request for quotation, an invitation to tender is the open request made by procuring organizations, which are usually advertised in a local newspaper to invite potential suppliers interested in bidding for the particular contract, the advertisement, to submit their bids or their tenders for the supply of goods and services. Organizations can only use invitation to tender when, of course, the value of the item in question is high. Then again, the Public Procurement Act 2003, Act 663 will give us the thresholds for which we can use the invitation to tender. And there are 2 types of invitation to tender. We have the open tendering, where the advertisement is advertised for every supplier that can or is interested in submitting or interested in tendering to get access. We also have the second type to be the selective or restrictive tendering, where the organization will use some pre-qualified tenderers, some pre-qualified suppliers, usually between 3 to 10, to come and bid or tender for the particular contract. So that once the buying organization issues the invitation to tender, they've made an offer to the supplying organization. Then the supplying organization can respond to the invitation to tender with their tender documents. We also have the KPIs, key performance indicators. Key performance indicators are clear qualitative or quantitative statements which define adequate or desired performance in key areas against which progress and performance can be measured. The key point about key performance indicators is that they state performance goals or expectations in a way that is capable of direct, detailed, consistent, measurable or measurements at operational levels using available data collection systems. These key performance indicators are the critical success factors that organizations are going to use to evaluate a supplier's performance. So an organization can probably say, for this particular contract, the one key performance indicator, one critical success factor I'm going to use, one key thing I need that is very important to us is quality. And hence we assign, let's say, 100% to quality. Suppliers are supposed to make sure they get it right the first time. They're supposed to assure quality in their processes. Whatever output they're giving us must come up with the best quality available. So because of this, we assign 100% to quality. Then at the end of the period, we check how many defects did you record. We recorded, let's say, 5% defects. Then 5% minus 100%, we have 95. How many reworks were done? 10% reworks. 10% minus 95, we are getting 85. Then after doing all this, we check your level of performance. How did you perform on our critical success factor? How did you perform on our key performance indicator? Then we use this outcome, this result, to evaluate the performance, to say, okay, this supplier performed to our expectation. This supplier did not perform to our expectations. We can keep this supplier on our supplier approved list. We can award future contracts to this supplier, or we are not going to work with such a supplier again. By way of summary, we have discussed contract documents. We have also explained how to define contract and agreement. We further explained quotations and tender documents. We ended by looking at key performance indicators. Thank you.